Good evening. Before we get started, we have a presentation tonight, but we'll approve the meeting minutes and some public comments, and we have Mark Gutschall from Land Studies who's here tonight. Thank you for coming. If you have a copy of last month's minutes, are there any comments? I don't have any comments. Anyone have comments? All in favor, approve the minutes from last month's meeting? Ayes have it. And since there is only Mark from public comment, I'm assuming there'll be no public comment. So tonight the presentation is going to be on regional stormwater and flood reduction pollution removal. So whenever you're ready to go, Mark.
Open this up. I got a few slides to show you here, and well, I'm doing this just to give you an acquaintance of who I am. I grew up in Springfield, was born in Philly, and used to work for a group called Schmidt and Company. I was telling Dan. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. Some of the main points that I'm going to be really focusing on are value proposition, context, and performance. A lot of times when we talk about stormwater, there's all kinds of different discussions that go on with it, but those are the main issues that I want to talk about. And as you being a leader in the state with how you're addressing it, I think the value proposition is front and center when you get down to cost per unit, and the units need to be measured and then analyzed from a standpoint of performance. A lot of times what we've recognized over the years is it's kind of a PR pop in the beginning, and then there's maintenance issues after it. So the company, let's see if I can do this without my glasses to get started. But to give you a background, just a little bit about myself and the company, and I'll talk about some of the principles that I'm referring to here. I won't make this really that long, but try to be as informative as I can with this. And then get into a couple brief case studies just to give you a flavor for what that is, and then how it potentially could fit into your community here. So this is the background of our company. My wife, Kelly's a landscape architect. She's the president. I'm the vice president. I've got a natural resource background, and consider myself a restoration practitioner. So we do projects. Our brand is Green Master Planning and Design Build, and have been doing them for, this is our 26th year. It's a small company. We've got 30 people. We've got PEs, landscape architects, environmental and ecologists, and construction folks. So we're licensed to build and maintain, and have done so for quite a long time. And that last one is the economic ecology one that I'm referencing in that booklet. And the booklet is really intended for communication and understanding of a complicated issue. There's a lot of nomenclature with acronyms, and for people that aren't even for people that are dealing with this every day, it's confusing on how EPA looks at things, and the state, counties, townships, etc. So we've tried to make a communication so that the decision makers and the lay people will have a better appreciation of the topic and the subject matter at hand. So I like to use this picture because some of us maybe in the room have used that tool in the past, and it really had one function, and that's it. And that's what we believe a lot of how we deal with stormwater looks at, is a very antiquated way of dealing with a situation that really, if you take a look at the time frames that we've been working with stormwater, haven't really been successful. And if they were successful, we wouldn't be in the situations that we are in right now. So what we're advocating is what all of us now have in our pockets or our pocketbooks, is a multifunctional opportunity that puts the ecology of the system first, and basically uses engineering and performance management and measures to validate the ecological functions. So that's the sort of the big approach. So our tagline is creating functional natural landscapes, and functional being the key word, and these adjectives are the things that we really need to key in on if we're looking at a value proposition. So there's X amount of dollars that your township is going to be spending on what I consider flood reduction and pollution removal. And these types of variables need to really be front and center, because they are the ones that get measured, and they are the ones that will be maintained. And the operation and maintenance of any type of best management practice really needs to take into account what's the cost per unit that you're talking about. If you don't get down to that, you're in a kind of a gray zone. So the value proposition is dollars per unit, and these are the units that we typically discuss when we're talking about that. So the traditional approach that we see today from a context standpoint is typically a smaller context, and we advocate that these types of best management practices are needed and they're good to have. But there's also, I think, a differential between symbolism and substantive problem solving. So when we really look at what the watershed or community needs, that should be looked at in pounds, hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, and those other units that we were talking about. And then we would compare them to these types of contexts. What is actually this type of system contributing to that solution? And that will start giving you an idea of, is it 10% of the solution, or is it 0.01% of the solution? You have the engineers to be able to easily do that, but I think looking at the goal in mind and backing into that will give you that value proposition. So the conventional larger regional scale, so context was one of the items that I wanted to address and really focus in on, and the previous slide really talks about a context of a very small place in your landscape. And most of our best management practices are retrofits, or they're swales, or they're rain gardens. So they're very small. And a lot of times, depending upon where they're located, the space that that area occupies could have a very big value proposition, especially in an area such as this township. So what we're advocating is a larger context. So think of it as your convenience store versus the Costco, okay, in a basically a cost, proposition there. This is actually a large, basin because I'm referring to the term regional, but these are the size projects that we have advocated for and quantified the benefits for. And there are much large, there are different contexts. This is a different approach. However, we've done over 30 of these, design build, over the last 11 years. And I want to show you one in a little bit of detail and summarize another, and then speak to a little bit of the principles and the foundations of why this is relevant to your township, and that there's opportunities in front of you in your township here. So this one is called Rock Lititz. Happens to be a proposed campus, and there's one building that's built now. It's about on 90 acres, okay? This is the town that I live in now. It's Lititz, Lancaster County, and you can see all the farmland around it, but we're really dealing with a site that is positioned immediately upstream of the borough itself. So it has a context that is very similar to an urban-suburban setting because of what's downstream. Size of the creek. What we do is we really do our homework and look at what's going on under the soils, okay? And so this is what the stormwater management facility built looks like. And what it has been able to do is allowed the entity, in this case it was a private developer, but this is very applicable to municipalities or any type of government agency looking at their land and their land use. And it was done within the floodplain. And that is the issue and the opportunity, because we're not utilizing what I consider valuable land, okay, for holes in the ground that typically require a lot of maintenance, and it is displacing valuable property. So this is a 17-acre site, and I'm not going to get into the engineering, the significance of the engineering and have a big discussion of it. I am going to give you an overview. So the black line is what the stream and the floodplain used to look like, and that's just a profile. And the purpose of showing this is to validate that we utilize traditional stormwater management measuring techniques. So there's nothing different about this. It's just the proximity of where we do the project is very different. And so people will look at, your flow and cubic feet per second and the areas that the existing and the proposed flow occupy. And if you notice, and these are the 2-year, 5, 10, et cetera, down, you can see that what we're doing here is opening up a very large, spacious area in which the stormwater then can occupy. And during a build-out of these return periods, and we like to focus really on the smaller storms, the 2 and the 5, and that's where we're getting huge magnitude differences in performance. This is for the entire subwatershed, not just the site. So when we're looking at performance, it's potentially almost the entire subwatershed, and when you're above an urban or suburban area such as yourself, these are significant numbers from a flood reduction standpoint, and then they decrease as they go down towards the 100-year storm. Volume, we pick up a lot of volume as it relates to the area that we're working within, the wetted area in acres and infiltration rate. And these are summaries that are required for DEP, et cetera. And you can see in a square footage, we are bringing in almost 500,000 square feet of increased 2-year wetted area. And this, for those that are interested in nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment, these are magnitudes difference of what the site is actually putting out and what this best management practice is able to achieve. And these are 3 magnitudes difference. That site itself is with a 50% safety factor from DEP. It's really about 500,000 pounds of sediment, but they cut it in half. So big numbers, it's all validated, and it's different. And different is uncomfortable because we're talking about something outside of the status quo. But several of the slides here are going to give you a a picture of why and where this approach came from. And it's very important to understand, especially living in the area around here close to Philadelphia, where the colonies got started on the basis of these types of landscapes. All of our food and clothing and lifestyle was around a structure like that, and they were mills. And these were basically dams that then backed up water here and ran water through a race, and that would turn the wheel. So weaponry, cutting logs, gunpowder, making everything. Basically, our outlets in the wall were this. And if you start looking at the landscape around here, you'll all recognize the old structures, etc. So this is where our country really got founded and started upon. So this is just some diagrams looking down from the top and the side, again, turning the wheel and making energy. And they look like this. So the technical issue is really what we're talking about here is something called legacy sediment. What the dams actually, or even areas where there was a lot of activity, where there was mass movement of sediment that backed up. And a lot of times it's easy to talk about a dam and the features because people are used to seeing that. But this is really what we're talking about. And I'm going to reference that as we move forward with the terminology of legacy sediment. So Ward's one of our engineers. He's about 6 feet high. And what our maps would call a floodplain up here really aren't the floodplain. They're a buried floodplain. And the historic floodplain throughout all this region that we occupy in Delaware County and everywhere else around us have this condition. These types of features don't just kind of grow out of the bank. A tree used to be here, and underneath here was the historic stream bed. Okay, and we know that because we uncover corduroy roads and we radiocarbon date and metal trace and pollen analyze the old floodplain here. And that ties in directly with this lag of sediment. So in order to have credibility, we're restoration practitioners. We wanted to, and we teamed up for the last 12 years with academia on this. And Franklin and Marshall College really gets the credit for this issue of the legacy sediment. And you can see this area here around Philadelphia is really the target zone. So there's 66 counties. Here are the top 20. And the areas around our Delaware County here are in that top 20. And these are where the densities are. And this is the type of density throughout the entire state, and we happen to be in the bullseye of it. So trying to validate this approach for people that haven't heard it before, we've been talking about it for 10 years. The EPA and DEP and FNM and Land Studies put on a workshop years ago, and there was a 5-year study on a site that we did a design build with all these investigators of 5 different universities and federal and state and USGS. So there's data here that supports this. The existing conditions, if we walked outside the park here, these are the kind of things that we see, and a lot of times we'll say, well, that's the Walmart or the farmer or somebody's driveway that got bigger with imperviousness. And the reality is our streams used to look like this, and our floodplains used to look like this, and the issue really is the soils have buried that, and the streams are cutting down through it. So that's just a quick primer of the principles and foundation of what I'm referring to when I'm talking about floodplain restoration and this legacy sediment. One last quick look at another project. This happens to be a retirement community, but headwater streams, both of these were headwater streams that I referenced. This is a before shot. Okay, do a little plan. These were the sites. And so, you make a mess for like a few weeks, and people get uncomfortable with that, but it ends up looking like this. It's a regional stormwater facility that has the metrics, and it's located in the floodplain, not in the upland areas. And this provides significant flood reduction and pollutant removal for the communities. So where are we at here in your backyard? Darby Creek and all its tributaries, and I know there's been a lot of work and studies on this. We've looked at some of the homework. You've got these conditions all throughout here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but because you know more about this than I do because of your committee. But I have looked around over the last couple of years here and recognized there are some big opportunities right in front of you. For the last year, we've had a natural resource master plan contract with Eastern College, really looking at the invasives and maintenance issues for them. And we're actually working for your Clem McCrone Park now on something a little bit different, more kind of a landscape architecture planning. But just walking in through here, and this site here is like primo for what I'm referring to. And we typically start with properties that you already own, so you don't have to actually pay for that. Did talk to Haverford, and one of the spots that would be really great from a truly regional and watershed approach would be a track like this one down through here that could provide some large, significant opportunities for flood reduction. And that hasn't really happened yet in the state at a municipal level because it's different, and usually the engineers of record that are representing the townships are a little uncomfortable with this type of approach, but I think it really looks at a leadership issue and an opportunity to try different things while you're maintaining the status quo and dealing with the best management practices that are really on the books already. There's opportunities to look at some new and different things. So, with that, I'd like to entertain any questions that you may have or thoughts, but if there are opportunities for the future, we'd love to have the opportunity to demonstrate how this may be something that could help your community and provide really a backup of the metrics and the cost-benefit analysis that goes with it. Yeah. Any thoughts or questions? Otherwise, I don't see any big crowds behind me, so I'm not gonna.
Could you give a real quick rundown of what type of permitting you need for these projects?
Yeah, permitting is definitely different than your traditional approaches. This is a comprehensive permit. It's a joint permit, so it's dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers and DEP. It's probably an 8 to 12 month process. So it's not something that is sort of on the same lines as, hey, let's go and retrofit our basin here that you guys may have the permit for, and you're going to get a waiver from DEP. So it's definitely a comprehensive permit. And what I advocate for is stepping back and looking at this in a 20-year period. This isn't a flash in the pan type of idea. This is about planning. It's about really regional planning. And it's looking at the land that you have and looking at a comprehensive long-term perspective. So a year of getting a permit sounds really, long compared to what we have, but if you look at this will yield X amount of quantifiable benefits. And so you weigh that with what you're doing now and the time that it takes. But it's definitely a lot longer process. And to be honest with you, some of the DEP people, we've had to get this approach in the best management practice, and we did about 5 or 6 years ago. But depending upon, whoever's reviewing it, it's still a little hand-holding, and you need central office usually to get involved with these types of projects, which we do on a regular basis. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Hartranft that works in Harrisburg that his job is to deal with these specifically types of projects and work it through the regional offices. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Could you go back to your Eastern College slide and then just give us a little bit more information on what you're doing there?
Yeah. For those of you that have been in through that area, we have about 10 employees that all they do is go out and do, we call it the field operations. They do invasive control, and they put in erosion and sediment control and build projects. So what we've done is put together a master plan of areas to prioritize where they're what we consider, rank some of the problems are at. And typically we'll put together cost estimates of dealing with that. Most of it was, the majority of it, not all of it, but the majority of it was invasive plant removal and some smaller restoration, not at the scale that I'm referring to here. And we worked with, and typically what we do is we work with other engineering firms or other planning firms. So we usually provide value to the other entities that are working with whoever it is, because it's a niche. But to answer your question, master plan, targeted implementation with an emphasis on invasive riparian corridor management is really kind of what we're doing there. We are doing a little bit of water quality work as well, but it's not the main issue. So Derrick and Edson happens to be in our town, and they're doing the campus work. They do a lot of work for campuses, and we happen to. I've been talking to the person down there for about 5 or 6 years, and it took a little while, but they finally said, "Yeah, come on in and check us out." So I think there's a lot more opportunities there as well, but it would be, obviously because I'm talking to you guys, it would be great to figure out a way to sort of get this thing kind of tied into it. That's depending on, it's always interesting to me how people view a park like that, and somebody here is going to think about it differently than you, but from an ecological standpoint, or an engineering or an opportunity, I think there's a lot of room for improvement there.
Yeah, the reason I ask, if you just were able to scooch your map northwest,
I don't think I can.
Yeah, I know you can't.
Sorry.
But you have Valley Forge Military Academy.
Right.
Up at like 11 o'clock, and then you have Cabrini at like 1 o'clock, and they're both like uphill with like huge driveways that are pouring water down into that.
Yeah. Yeah, and this type of thing becomes what we consider an opportunity zone. So we typically do a watershed action plan and then an implementation plan, and we would identify areas like this, not only to put on a map, but we would do so to provide quantitative data that would allow you to see what would happen in a 2-year storm or a 5-year storm, or what would happen, over a period of time with that sediment. And these become not little tiny kidneys, but very, very larger ones comparatively to what you're dealing with now with a small rain garden, and you're using your own property for that. And that's what we consider a very large value proposition because it's an area that you already own and being able to maintain without any type of purchase or cost there.
Do you have any cost data on maintaining things like rain gardens or wet ponds, things like that?
Yeah.
Because that's something that the township is going to have to consider moving forward as we look at resolving some of our problems in smaller areas, retrofits and things, is the maintenance cost. And we don't really have real numbers on that right now.
We do. This is what we do for a living. We have a whole division that does that. And we'd be more than happy to look at, instead of just general costs, we would come out and say, what are we looking at? Or what are you proposing? And then you would get actual costs, because it's a big difference between saying 3 acres of this or an acre of that versus here's the site. This is what is going on here, access. What are you going to do with the material? Landowner issues. Where's it going? What do you want us to spray if that's an issue to neighbors? We're all, we got the license to do that. We do mechanical, chemical, and biochemical treatments depending upon what the client needs. I haven't talked lately to Radnor Country Club, but about 7 or 8 years ago, we did a full-scale design for them with this. And I wanted to see how things would turn out here, but I'd probably go back to them and say, hey, they might be interested in dusting that off and seeing, for the Ithan Creek deal. So, and there's a group called the Pennsylvania Landscape Nurserymen's Association, and we put together a training manual with certification for their members, and I'd be more than happy to make sure we got a copy to you, so they come through a training system. And something that I didn't point out, and I actually have it here, but I didn't want to take up too much time, is I'm more, like I said, an applied, here comes the stormwater. An applied restoration practitioner. So I learned by doing and seeing over a long period of time. And we have projects that have been in the ground for 15 years. And we put together and produced a tour about 3 or 4 years ago and bring out academia, we bring out government and nonprofits to walk. And what you get is, you get to the site, sometimes a township official's there, sometimes not. You get a sheet of paper that says it costs this much, it took this long to permit, this was the maintenance, it's usually 2 years. Here's the issues that we had, and here's the performance. And the performance is the thing that really a lot of people aren't talking about, because they haven't been able to really quantify that. And that gets back to the value proposition of, if you're going to spend $500,000 or $100,000, what are you getting for that? That's where the discussion really should go. Because just like you're building this building, somebody's going to say, square footage cost, what is it? It's no different. So I would invite anybody who's interested in that. We do put on the tours, and all we ask you to do is wear boots and come out.
Well, I think this is an important part of the consideration
Okay.
for projects that we have in the future. We definitely need to have a good idea of what the maintenance required is. And I still, at this point, haven't really been able to get good cost data on maintenance for a municipality. Do you work with any particular municipalities, or are you mostly commercial and institution?
No, you know, it's a great question, but we work for improving the environment. So whoever's really interested in that, that's who we work for. It could be, we do work for townships, we work for EPA, DEP, developers, nonprofits. We are kind of like have blinders on, you know, if somebody asks the question, it's, here's the issue, you got to maintain this, restore it. So it's a whole host of different people. But one of the reasons why you're having trouble getting those numbers, and I'm sure some of you are familiar about this whole MS4 issue, you know, EPA and DEP don't talk too good. You know, they don't communicate too well. So DEP is kind of like the abandoned child of being in the group of knowledge on all this to get things actually moving. And so there's not a lot of people doing it, but other states are doing it. So, you know, we're positioned pretty well to really go after the municipal maintenance area, because it's going to be a big deal. And it is a big deal. It's just nobody's enforcing it. Like I said, you're leaders. You're taking things on proactively. You're probably the first, you know, the first ones in the state doing it, if not the second or third. And so, yeah, you're gonna be feeling these issues with your fees. Things get built now. Like, now what? So we would be very prescriptive as opposed to generic about our response to you, and would be more than happy to come down at a you know, at a no fee just to talk to you about it, to see what you got and give you an idea of what this, you know, a magnitude. Is it a dime? Is it a dollar? What's that decimal point looking like? And then, you know, we look at things like I said, planning, master planning. Like, you got 10 of these, you got one of them, you got 40 of them. And therefore, the economy of scale becomes a major cost benefit as well. So. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming out.
I'm going to just pull this stick out of here. Do you mind if I stick around to hear what you guys are talking about?
No. We'll see if we can spare a chair.
Okay. Thank you.
And Dan, whenever you're ready, I know you said you brought some slides. Wherever you want to start.
Sure.
I can't wait to hear where we're at.
Okay, so wanted to give an update on the Ithan Creek flood study. We have made quite a bit of progress on the model. I'd say it's essentially complete at this point. There's always ways we can improve it, we can tweak it, but I think we've gotten out of it what we wanted to. And I know, Regina, I think you were not at the last meeting, so some of this might be new to you. Just a quick overview, I think most of you already saw this. Just what the flood modeler is. It's CHM Hill's software for rapidly assessing flooding. And this is really an elevation-based model. So it doesn't necessarily take into account inlets, pipes, culverts, things like that. It's really just giving us a sense of the risk of flooding based on contours and elevations. So we ran a couple more storms than we did previously. I think there was a comment from Paige, if I recall, about running smaller storms, quicker, shorter durations. So we did that. Obviously, we can run a whole bunch of more storms if needed. But we looked at the 1 year, 1 hour, the 2 year, 1 hour, and then the 5, 25, and 100 year, 24-hour storms. Obviously, just the difference there is the duration and the depth. Now, here are the results. A little hard to see at this scale, but This is the whole watershed. We also ran it, Regina, for your sake, we did run the model for the other watersheds in the township. We're not showing the results on this because we're really trying to focus on Ithan, but at least we've done some of the initial processing for those other watersheds if we want to come back to those at some point. So these are the results. Really, going through the sequence, you just see that the flooding areas get bigger, the depths get deeper. Not all that, somewhat interesting from this scale, but we really need to kind of zero in on where are the flooding areas of interest to us and to you. So that gets to the analysis part of this. And one of the things we did that was different from previously, from last month, we tried to push the model somewhat. We've never really done this, but look at, really analyze the results in the GIS over top of the parcels, which we eventually received. Took a little while. But we looked at the extent of the flooding and the depth of the flooding over streets and over parcels, and try to quantify that, try to turn that into a volume to start to look at, all right, where are we seeing the most amount of water flooding for these different storms. We looked at, for this, the 1 year, 1 hour. Just thinking that that was a good proxy, just, if it floods for that storm, it's going to flood in other events. So we did that, and we kind of cross-checked to the areas that either you all have told us, or Steve has told us, or we've seen in the Act 167 for the Darby Cobbs, to try to get some validation on some of those results. And then we looked at, we'll call this kind of the top 10. There's some, it's quantitative, but there's also some judgment that goes into this. If it's a flooded area that is in a stream channel, for instance, there's no homes around, there's no real risk of any damage to property or life and limb, we kind of didn't really prioritize those sites. So I don't know why it's not going. So this is kind of the 10 areas of most significance in our opinion, and they're not necessarily in any order. We had those numbered, but I thought that signified a prioritized order, so I took that out. So I don't think many of these are probably surprises to us. Banbury and Francis, I know we've talked about that, the area by the Wawa. Maybe we'll go out in a little bit and we'll see some actual flooding in real time. Lancaster Ave, there were a few areas that showed some flooding in the model. Obviously near the fire station, Midland Ave, St. David's Road, Pembroke, all those are just notorious areas. Near where we are now, of course, another Lancaster Avenue one, near Kenilworth Road, Spring Mill Road, Wildhaven Road. So those are the 10 that we really zeroed in on as being probably the most significant in our opinion. And that's what they look like on the map. There you can see the letters signifying the 10, and then there's some other dots which signify other locations that we either knew about just from anecdotal evidence, or the model lit up for some flooding zones. So you can kind of see where they all fall. Really, no surprise that a lot of them are centered around downtown Wayne, again, the middle school, to the west and to the east. Just notorious flooding with the old stream that was channelized, or piped, I should say. So just going down the list, Banbury Ave and Francis Ave. Again, that's for a 1 year, 1 hour storm. The different colors signify the different flood depths. So again, I think, I know a couple of meetings ago, we saw some pictures of that area in particular. Not terribly surprising. Lancaster Ave, that's at Bellevue and Wayne, right by the middle school area, uphill the middle school area. Obviously, the middle school area is a whole lot at Runnymede Ave. I don't know if I've really heard of that area flooding. I'm curious what you all think. I think a lot of that ends up down in front of the fire station. I think that. Okay. Right. So this is going downhill from the middle school, Midland Ave, and fairly significant flooding. Just keep going to the east. Brookside Ave by Orchard Way and Ivan, so getting closer to where we are. There's the Township building. Again, a well-known flooding problem for a while. So this is a little bit further east on Lancaster. A few areas, we kind of picked one that we thought was the more significant. There was another area, I believe, that was further to the east that also was showing up. But we also used our judgment on some of these, thinking that, if we solve one of these issues, the other one that's maybe nearby gets solved as well, or greatly reduced. Spring Mill Road. And that's the last one. That one, I believe, let's go back a little bit, J. Yeah, so that one's the most southern location, J, most southern of the areas that we looked at. So that's where we're at. I was hoping to be a little bit further along on the task 2, which is the actual conceptual solutions part of this. We were kind of hoping the GIS task would catch up to us, because this is going to be a fairly map-intensive task, and we're just not there yet, but we're really close. Some of the map info data needed to be massaged a little bit more than we were anticipating. And like I said, it took a little longer to get the parcel data. But now that we're getting all those pieces in, we're set up pretty nicely, I think, to start looking at those solutions and deliver that at the August meeting. So any questions on this?
So when you say solutions, where there'll be a approximate cost with those solutions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, Heather, we were looking at the some of the work that Chagrin Valley did a few years ago, and it'd probably be along those lines. So an idea, a conceptual plan of some sort, probably at this scale, where we would show some areas, not very detailed, obviously, but then a ballpark cost that would be associated with that.
Could you pick one and just?
Sure.
I mean, obviously, we'll all forget in a month anyway, but could you just pick one and then what your, maybe a more interesting one? And these were not in priority order?
Not necessarily. We just wanted to pick 10 that were the most significant.
We should probably pick one that was on our original list. Like Francis would probably be a good one. Banbury and Francis. So what would you envision that turning into from there to what you give us?
What type of a solution could this be?
Yeah, I'd say what type of package? What would your deliverable look like?
Well, so task 2 is a higher level look, and it's going to essentially pinpoint areas, whether it's a point and an idea, probably a little bit more detailed than that. But this is the solution. These are some benefits. Maybe these are some negatives associated with that. This is the ballpark cost associated with that. Possibly if there are partnering opportunities, with PennDOT, and that might be the obvious one in a case like that, or along Lancaster. But things like that, high level metrics along those lines. Versus the next phase is more, we've zeroed in on 3 sites, 3 potential projects, and then we deliver a concept plan that's a little bit more detailed, still conceptual in nature, but we zero in, we show a footprint, we show how the system is supposed to function, where it's going to drain to, how it's going to receive water, that kind of thing, a little bit more detail on the costs.
So that third element, would that include hey, there's inlets here at Lancaster, and they have, we have to make sure they're maintained, and then there's an inlet down at the corner of Banbury or Francis, or there isn't, and there should be, and, is that the kind of?
That is exactly the kind of thing, yes. Yes, okay. It's acknowledging what's there, what kind of infrastructure is there, how that will kind of interface with what we're talking about, what kind of new infrastructure might have to go along with it, all of that.
And our existing Radnor database has that information, or you'll need to go do some survey work?
We do have, yeah, we do have the infrastructure. I don't know how much is missing from it, but we definitely do have that. And,
Okay.
and that's part of the, that's going to be in the GIS that's being built as we speak.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So is increasing the capacity of the roadway drainage system being considered in any of this?
Bigger pipes? Is that what you're
Well, I mean,
increasing?
maybe inlet spacing, things like that.
That could be certainly one of the solutions, yes. I mean, obviously, there's all kinds of bottlenecks along Lancaster. I looked at that personally years ago when designing the middle school site, and we came up with what we thought was a good solution and ran into some utility conflicts. It's been kind of sitting in that limbo for a while. So I think there's definitely hopefully there's a good solution at the middle school that can help solve a lot of that, just with what's already built. Here, maybe there's a smaller solution that can deal with that area, that localized flooding that has been a problem, and not, well, again, we have to look at it, but not so much, running bigger pipes down to the middle school site from this location. But nothing's really off the table at this point. After hearing Mark, I'm definitely not going to be forgetting about those regional opportunities, because I think those are great ideas as well, where they're feasible.
Well, I think there's two ways to approach the problems that we're looking at, because they are on the roadways. One is to improve the infrastructure, and the other is to go upstream and reduce the amount of flow to that location.
Right.
And which, obviously that does more for water quality. But I don't think we could do much in the road without PennDOT on board, because it's their road, and they have deeper pockets than Radnor. So
Right.
I don't know how we go about engaging them, but I think that's pretty important for this site, for the township site here, for all of these sites, is to get PennDOT at least engaged, so that if there's something we want to do within their right of way, they're going to partner with us for that.
Right.
And I think that almost the time to do that is once we have an answer, and then I think they'll be more willing to work with us if we say, look, here's what we have, here's what we're facing, here's what we want to do. How can we do it?
The other thing is, too, with the information that you're putting together, really a documentation of the existing problems, and that they are located on roadways, and where things like South Wayne Avenue and Lancaster Avenue combining, as well as Conestoga Road, they're all state roads, and they're all lacking in, well, not only maintenance, but the proper infrastructure to
Right.
safely carry the water off the roads.
Right.
So can you go back to your list, your major list, the ABC? So how many of these are state roads then? Because really, there should be like a Lancaster after that, right?
Right.
So seems like at least half of them, right? Because Spring Mill is 320,
Right.
so that hits. Seems like it's a good. Yeah, I think somehow in our description we should be
Yeah.
designating whether we would be able to do anything without the state's help.
Right.
Like,
Agreed.
or help is maybe the wrong word, but
Right.
input. Yeah, yeah.
So we'll certainly distribute these slides. There we go. Yeah. Nothing's going to stop this presentation. Yeah, this meeting. So I was just saying that we'll certainly get you this presentation and any other data that we develop to get to this point. Any other questions, thoughts?
If there's nothing else, then maybe we can get into capital.
Budgeting and planning by candlelight or cell phone light.
I know, the one night I forget my cell phone. So, I just had some general thoughts, just, you know, in looking at putting together a capital budget here. And I think we
Could almost back into it. I think it doesn't have to be as difficult.
you know, as maybe you would like to dive into it. Like, for instance, I mean, I came up with just a short list of items, kind of similar to the handout that Dan had provided. You know, looking at the ongoing projects and what we anticipate will be any additional cost. There's money that we would definitely want to attribute towards the Ithan Creek because there's going to be a project that's going to be generated from that. We had already allocated last year and this year $50,000 for videotaping, sewer, identifying of storm sewers. We have CH2M's fee. We have the $50,000 rebate per year. And then if you notice on the list here, there are miscellaneous permit fees, administration fees, and then some sort of emergency fund in case something breaks, and it always does. So if there's anything I'm forgetting, let me know, but it's just seems like we have like certain categories that, you know, is any thoughts into putting forth, you know, a simplified, you know, capital budget.
Well, do we have a dollar figure that we have left this year that we can allocate? Is that like a number that's now known?
Well, if you look under, I know it's hard to see.
I can't see.
So under 2015, it's 925,000.
I can put it up there.
Oh, that'd be great, Dan. And then projected for 2016 is 1.5 million.
Or you said the balance for this year?
For this year, they're estimating as of now, it's about
925,000
Available funds
available.
that aren't spoken for.
Now I can't say if they're not spoken for.
So that's what
but
I'm
yeah.
looking to have, is the number remaining to be spent this year out of our funds. What has not already been committed?
Well, it looks like on this cost estimate sheet here, it does include the 50,000 for cleaning. It does include 2 of the 3 culvert projects that we've already allocated money for. It does have North Wayne Basin.
We can't see you. I can hear you. It's still recording. But
Okay.
I'm going to pick up it in the dark like this.
Okay.
I don't know why the generators are coming on. I called people. I don't know what's going on.
They-
They're still recording if you want to.
Yeah, no, that's,
Just
are you,
kind of talk. I don't. It's going to be weird. But it's up to you guys.
yeah, we can do that.
What's that?
Yeah, if you want to just end the tape or the power went out, we can
Okay.
just do
Stop
that.
now then?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems silly if they hear a voice and don't see people.
Right, it'd be a little weird.
Yeah.
Well,
Usually the generator kicks on.
yeah.